So welcome back to the channel. Today we're fighting a 1-hour war games scenario. This one is Outflank the Hill, which is based on the Battle of Lutzen. So we've got the Anglo-Brunswick force with 2 artillery, 3 infantry and 2 cav versus 2 cavalry, 4 infantry and 2 artillery for the French force. So it's pretty evenly matched. The terrain itself, you've got 2 hills, a little forest and a little bit of concealed farmland. The British forces start up on the hill, and basically the whole objective of the game is whoever occupies this hill at the end of the game is the winner. The British force starts on the hill and the French have to push them off. In 1-hour war games it does talk about the blue team versus red, and so we just correspond that to uniforms. So in turn 1 the French started advancing. They had split their force so that the cavalry and 1 artillery were approaching from the south, whilst their main infantry force and an artillery piece were coming from the east. So I was playing as the British this time, and it was a bit of a tricky one to try and figure out prior to his troops being deployed where they were going to come from, so my deployment, it was quite tricky, but I decided I would deploy my Brunswickers down on the forward side of the slope just to try and break up the enemy as they came, seeing as there were so many of them. And I decided to keep my cavalry split. I kept half on one side and half on the other just in case, which actually turned out to be quite fortuitous. So the French came on in the same old style, mass columns, and then at the last second fanning out into line. And the cavalry came across the open ground and they were making a beeline for, at first, my artillery, but then that soon changed. So they quickly moved into musket range, but having my troops in front gave me desperately needed time for my artillery to go to work on them. So that's why I put the Brunswickers there. It was just more as a sacrifice so that my artillery could pound them before they got close to my main force. I was very concerned by his cuirassiers and hussars coming up down this side, so I had to split my fire from the artillery, which is never particularly beneficial. You really want to concentrate, but hey, have to do what you got to do. So turn 4 I moved up my Scots Greys to the top of the hill, which made him form his regiments into squares, which is what those kind of like H shapes are. On the right flank I charged with my lancers into his hussars. It was the only thing I could do to try and stop him at this point, and the lancers went to work. Although unfortunately I started to quite quickly get the worst of it, thanks to the dice. Yeah, but all the same it was holding him up. Yeah, both sides were taking a lot of casualties. On this side, now that his troops had formed square, it was giving my chaps a chance to really punish them. My volleys were starting to take effect, and the artillery blasting him apart at pretty close range as well. He did make the mistake though of stopping his cuirassiers in the wrong spot. Instead of doing a full move, he did a half move. I think he was going to move them again, but then forgot, and so they ended up stuck, and they took additional artillery shots. At this stage, one of my Brunswick regiments did break and they started running back up the hill, but they'd done the job. My lancers had lost 50%, but they were still stuck in there. The only thing I could do left, the Brunswickers, they were severely depleted, was to charge and try and break a square. It was kind of do or die time. At this moment his cuirassiers did swing round and went into the flank of my lancers, and it was pretty well game over at that stage, although the lancers did give a good final showing of themselves, but it was just too much for them and they got ridden down. My Brunswickers were destroyed, but they collapsed half of his square, which is what I needed. By turn 6 it was still anyone's game. His cavalry were now behind me, and I charged his infantry with my Scots Greys. It was now time, so off they went. And it was carnage. They rode the men down and just decimated them. But again, because his troops were in square, it was really starting to slow him up, and he was taking a lot of casualties. On the rear, on my rear I should say, he did charge my infantry regiment who I'd formed square. It was kind of the only thing he could do. He didn't have enough troops to do much else, so he went for it. As his troops started to come up the hills now, with my cavalry behind them, I just unloaded with all of my troops. The square held and put murderous volleys into his cavalry, so it wasn't going too well for him, but it was still anyone's game. My units across the board had taken a heck of a lot of pounding, and they were close to breaking or being destroyed. So it was a close run thing, but in that final turn his forces gave way before mine, and so I ended up holding the hill and winning the game. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.